I guess mine is not the first heart broken. My eyes are not the first to cry. I'd thought a great deal about escape, and I don't know if I had the guts to do it, quite frankly. I'm not the first to know there's just no getting over you. It is not my job to defend this woman, but to uphold the truth. As many years of jealousy, hatred and anger have shown us, there is no fury like a woman scorned. I know I'm just a fool who's willing to sit around and wait for you, but baby, can't you see? There's nothing else for me to do. I'm hopelessly devoted to you. He was poisoned, was he? Well, some say so. Who found the body? Well, we don't know. It's never been disclosed. There is no doubt in the minds of everyone in this room that a murderer sits before us now, and may she get the punishment she deserves. So now there's no way to hide. Since you pushed my love aside, I'm out of my head. I'm hopelessly devoted to you. She will tell you herself she committed this crime. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast.
Well, Terry, I reported over a week ago.
Studio 54 is probably the Mount Olympus of the disco world. The people who set the style for disco really start all their numbers here at Studio 54. Right now it is the center of the universe for those who dance to 125 beats a minute. These people behind me are waiting to get into 54. Some of them have been waiting for hours. Some will wait nearly all night. You see, it's worth it to them.
I'm not guilty right now.
Well, Terry, I reported over a week ago.
Well, my feelings, I'd like to see them, do something to him besides put him in a, institution. I'd like to see him be, killed if I got no feelings to say.
Prosecutor Robert Egan named Mrs. Wood's son along with all of Gacy's other victims as he opened for the state. Egan described Gacy as rational, premeditated, and evil, who killed his victims like flies when they got in his way. Carefully planned murders that resulted in bodies and bodies.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, I'm going to keep it short. We're just going to get straight to the stories. I do just want to say thank you very much to everyone who is reaching out on the Facebook group to get involved with the 1978-ness. It's lovely to see all your brilliant pictures of your lives and your hairstyles from the time. That's good to see. It's just really interesting to see your pictures of what you were up to in 1978. And a lot of people just telling me I wasn't born. So that's also good to know. Alright, we've got some more crazy stories from that year. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Alright, keeping with tradition, from the first couple of episodes, we'll start with a little odd story first. And we're going to go to Italy. Oh, where the Italians are. To Vatican City, to where the Pope lives. Now, I don't know about you, but I've always thought I would make an excellent Pope. I mean, I've got all the credentials. I really do. But sadly, it never seems to come up on a job site when I search for it. Well, maybe if I'd been in Italy in 1978, I might have been in with a shot, because this was an extraordinary year when something happened which has never happened before. There were 3 popes in 1 year. Let me tell you all about it. Pope Paul VI was the current pope, and he was very popular. He had been in this position for 15 years, and people regarded him as a good leader. So he stuck to the traditional views of the church, and his masses were really well attended. Now, in 1978, he was 81 years old. So he'd had a good time, or whatever the phrase is, but his time was up, sadly. And in 1978, he died. And when he died, he was remembered as a man who hadn't really rocked the boat, let's say, when he was Pope. Hadn't really been involved in a lot of controversy. But that's not actually true. There's a bit of glossing over the truth there. He had actually been involved in some stuff. It just had been swept under the carpet, is what had happened. He had once survived an assassination attempt when a man in Italy ran at him with a knife in the street, but luckily someone jumped in front of him and stopped him from being stabbed. So that was one thing. And then the second thing is that he got tangled up in rumours of gay sex with a French actor who had threatened to expose him as a gay man. So, he was teaching against homosexuality, but here he was supposedly having this affair with a man. But again, that was all just made to disappear. See, I told you I would be a good pope. I would definitely get out of the way if someone was coming at me with a knife. So I tried looking for some quotes or some words of this pope, just to try and get a bit of a feeling for him. And I found this, right? Although I'm not entirely convinced it's entirely his words. Apparently of the popehood, if that's what you call it, he said, "The position is unique. It brings great solitude. I was solitary before, but now my solitude becomes complete and awesome." I don't think that's right. I don't think the Pope ever said the word awesome. He's not some sort of American surfer, is he? Anyway, so how did he die? Well, he dies of a heart attack. We think. At least that's what's reported. Because there's something else, and I did not know this, but maybe you do. Popes do not get post-mortems. It just doesn't happen. So that means that the doctor who signs the death certificate, he or she has the last word on it. Interesting. Interesting indeed, especially with what's going to happen next. Anyway, the last words written down by Paul VI on the day he died were this: "What is my state of mind? Am I Hamlet or Don Quixote? Am I on the left? Am I on the right? I do not think I have been properly understood. However, I am filled with great joy." Okay, great, thanks. That makes no sense, but excellent. Love it. So now there's a time of major buzz and excitement and speculation because a new pope needs to be elected. And there is a great deal of ceremony around this. So those who can vote, they all gather together in a room in the Vatican. And this room has a chimney, and this chimney can be seen for miles and miles around, and thousands of people will travel to stare for hours at the chimney. Why? Well, because there's been a smoke system for years, so if black smoke comes out of the chimney, it means that no pope has been selected. If white smoke appears, it means that a pope has been chosen. So let's go to 1978. The eyes of the world are on that chimney, and speculation is absolutely rife about who is going to be picked. There's a man called Luciani. Now, he is the favourite amongst Italians on the streets. This is who they're guessing it's going to be. Although potentially controversial, he was had openly discussed some changes he would like to make to the Catholic Church. And people were like, he sort of said that now, and does that mean he might not be picked? Not sure. Anyway, they're all there, staring at the chimney, and the hours pass and the crowd starts to get impatient. Now remember, it can take weeks for a pope to be elected. I mean, it's not a decision that they rush. Do you know what I mean? It can take lots of time. So, on that day, impatience changes to something else. Annoyance. Black smoke is seen coming out of the chimney, a sign that no choice has been made. So people on the ground, they huff and they puff in annoyance. But before too long, they're excited to see more smoke emerging from the chimney, and this time it's white. However, the white quickly changes to grey. So what the hell does this mean? Well, it means confusion. It means no one has a clue what's going on. It was black one minute, it was white, now it's grey. What is going on? It's just a bizarre mistake. It's not meant to be grey. It was meant to be white. News spreads that a new pope has been chosen, and that to make it official, he will appear on the balcony later that evening to wave to the thousands of people waiting. So, at 7 p.m. that evening, the new pope emerges, and it's Luciani, the guy I mentioned a minute ago, or John Paul I, as he will be known. Luciani is just his nickname. And so he steps out on to the balcony to a roaring crowd. You see, this is where I just think I would be brilliant at this. I would love this bit of it. Imagine it, getting on all your fancy robes, getting on your new pope gear, your new pope jacket, and being like, stepping out onto that balcony. I would love it. I'd be like, I made it through the wilderness. Somehow I made it through. I'd sing them all a song. Be bloody brilliant. So, here he is. But this is where it turns weird. 33 days after being elected the new pope, he's found dead. A huge shock goes through the Catholic Church. How can this be? He's a fit man. What's gone wrong? And then the rumours begin. The rumours that will haunt the church for years to come. The rumour starts with this. He was poisoned. Well, was he? Some say so. Questions are asked like, who found the body? Well, we don't know, because it's never been disclosed who found his body. Why wasn't there a post-mortem? Well, haven't you heard? Popes don't get a post-mortem. They're never carried out. So how did he die? Well, some are saying it was a heart attack. Some say it was a stroke. Some say he fell and bashed his head in. Some say he had underlying health issues. There's even a rumour that he had cancer and hadn't told anyone. And this list goes on. And as that list goes on, so do the rumours that this new pope was about to expose some secrets that the church didn't want people to know. Money had gone missing. The mafia were involved. There were cover-ups of behaviour which could really rock the Catholic Church. And Luciani was going to be the man to put all this right. And so he had to go. The day after he dies, the process of election begins again. Oh my God, it's relentless, isn't it? It is relentless. It's now that the men who vote must gather and vote for the third Pope in the same year. After 2 weeks, it takes 2 weeks this time, white smoke appears and John Paul II is elected, and he will reign as Pope for 26 years. I'm pretty sure I'm not using any of the right terminology here. I don't think you reign as a Pope. I don't think Popeness exists, but you know, we're just going to go with it. So that's fine. So we've got this new Pope. He is around for a long time. But, the two who went before him, the man with the gay skeletons in the closet, and the man who was going to expose some secrets, well, their deaths over the years have changed continually in the history books, and they continue to change depending on what source you read. To this day, investigative journalists still go in on this case, trying to find what was being covered up in 1978, the year of the 3 popes. Okay, 1978, wasn't it great? Well, Argentina won the Football World Cup, and celebrations across Argentina lasted for a full month, with police arresting over 6,000 Argentinians for drunken behaviour. Vogue magazine tried to launch transparent plastic trousers as a thing for the high street, but they never took off. I would so have worn them. Bring them back, I'll wear them now. Transparent trousers, yes. And in 1978, the most popular baby names were Jennifer and Michael. Okay, story 2. Right, I've picked this story because within this 1978 project, as well as me looking at the stories of the time and bringing those stories to you, that's ultimately what I'm doing. Kind of what I'm trying to do in a slightly bigger way is look a bit at the attitudes of the time, what they say about values, culturally, what was going on in that time that we can kind of reflect on now and go, oh, has that changed? Is it better? Is it worse? And this story that I'm going to tell, I think, is a really good example of values at the time versus what would happen now. Anyway, we can talk about that at the end. I'm going to start with some of the words that were read in court. It is not my job to defend this woman, but to uphold the truth. As many years of jealousy, hatred and anger have shown, there is no fury like a woman scorned. She was a woman scorned, and that is why we sit in this courtroom. She was wound so tightly, she had no option but to have this psychotic episode. She was embattled in her position and she was stoic. This led to her actions. She saw opportunities to change others, and this one person she could not change. So she killed them. They were opposites. They were worlds colliding, and Jean Harris knew it. Miss Harris would tell the police that she did indeed shoot the doctor because he had been sleeping with every woman in town and she had had it. Jealousy turned to fury, and Jean Harris had a plan. With fury in her heart and a gun in her jacket, she went to his house. She knew what she was going to do. She pressed her finger on that trigger, knowing it was revenge. She doesn't sit in this courtroom pleading insanity. She has confessed. She will tell you herself she committed this crime. May she get the punishment she deserves. It is easy to paint a woman with a brain as a woman with power and a rage-fueled killer. But that's the easy way out. It doesn't make it right. The story of the older woman who kills her lover because he takes a younger girlfriend, it's tired. We are tired of this story. You will be told that this woman drove to his house intending to kill him, but the truth is this: she intended to kill herself. You will hear a letter she sent to him, and they will attempt to tell you that this proves she was unstable. You will hear that years of prescription pills pushed her to this dreadful act. This is not a woman driven by malice, but a woman pushed to the edge by a powerful man who manipulated her. I ask today that the court find this woman not guilty. I ask today that the court find this woman guilty. Okay, breakfast. Breakfast looks like this. Half a grapefruit. I hate grapefruit. Bread with nothing on it. And coffee or tea black. Lunch looks like this. Boiled tomatoes. I hate tomatoes. And another piece of bread. Yet again, nothing on it. And dinner, fish, possibly a steak with vegetables and a salad. That's a diet from 1978. A very important diet in this story. It's the Scarsdale diet. So, it's a little bit sort of Atkins diet. It's a lot of like, eat a lot of meat, drink a lot of black tea, black coffee, you don't put anything on your bread, you know, you have sort of quite a lot of fish, things like that, and it adds up to 1,000 calories a day or less. So what the diet offers is a huge weight loss. Like, you can lose in 2 weeks of this diet huge amounts of weight. Now, I know this diet quite well, actually. It's still around now. I mean, it was created in 1978, and this story sort of talks about its creation. But yeah, I know this diet quite well because I don't think I've mentioned this before, but years and years ago, I used to be like a bodybuilder back in the day. Yeah, used to, like, you know, pump iron and all that sort of stuff. So then, you know, what I would do is I would shred lots of weight. I would lose loads of weight so that, you know, I had all like really big muscles. So yeah, so I'm really familiar with this diet. The diet is created by Dr. Herman Tarnower and a woman called Jean Harris. Although, if you search the diet book for Jean's name, you might struggle to find it. Okay, let's get into the story. Jean was born in Chicago in 1923. Now, from a very young age, Jean was very, very smart, very, very clever, and she was born into quite a well-to-do family. And there's an expectation in this family that Jean will do well in life. She'll get a good job, and she will marry well. So, Jean goes to a good college. And in 1945, she would be, let me work that out, she would be 23 years old. She marries a man. Now, her family don't really approve of this man. They think he's a bit of a waster, a bit unambitious. And that's kind of the reason that Jean marries him. Her relationship with her parents, it's not great. They're quite hard on Jean. And they pick apart a lot of the choices Jean makes in her life. Like, she decides she wants to be a teacher, and her dad tells her that's a terrible job. He doesn't want her doing that, but it's what she wants to do. Her dad constantly tells her she's married the wrong man. And Jean will say, years later, she actually only did that to really annoy her dad. So, with this husband, she will have 2 kids. As for teaching, Jean really loved it. She studied, she got a master's degree in education, and she was teaching young kids, and she absolutely loved it. She was really comfortable in that place. Because one thing Jean was very, very good at was discipline. Now, how that translates to other people's opinion of Jean is that people saw her as a bit uptight. That's how she was viewed by other people, that she is maybe a little bit strict, a little bit sort of not got a lot of fun about her. She's quite uptight. But the problem is, Jean didn't really want to be seen like that, but it's kind of the way that she came across. Now, she didn't have an awful lot of friends, Jean. She just had the odd friend here and there. She sort of kept herself to herself. She had her husband, she had her 2 kids, and she had her job. But by 1964, Jean is bored. Oh, so bored. She's bored of her life. She wants something different. She needs a bit of excitement. So, she reconnects with an old friend of hers. An old friend named Marge. And here's the old friend Marge, and Marge is living in New York, in an area called Scarsdale, sort of posh New York. And Jean looks at her old friend Marge and she thinks, I want this. I want this for me. Marge looks like she's got a lovely life. So Jean divorces her husband, and she goes in search of something more exciting. She knows exactly what she wants. She's a woman who knows what she wants, and that is, she wants a lawyer or a doctor. Someone wealthy who can give her a nice place to live, who can give her a nice life. So she starts spending a little bit more time with her friend Marge. Marge is like bringing her to her posh New York parties. Jean is attending these quite happily. And then she gets a job, and the job is in Philadelphia. So she's working in Philadelphia, but she's also going to visit her friend in New York. And it's at a party organised by Marge that she meets a Dr. Herman Tarnower. Okay, who's he? Well, Dr. Herman is a very wealthy doctor, a very successful doctor. He's a specialist in cardiology. He's a catch, as they say. He's handsome, he's wealthy, he's very popular socially, and he belongs to all those posh golfing societies and all of that kind of thing. He's not short of a bob or two. So Jean is immediately impressed with him, and she thinks this could be the man I'm looking for. So Jean wants to know more. She's like, what's his deal? What's going on with him? She discovers that he was the man who created the Scarsdale Medical Centre, and he has a very promising future ahead of him. Now, I say ahead of him, he still has it ahead of him, but he is 56 years old. So in doctor terms, he's not a million miles away from retirement. So there is a bit of an age difference between them. But yeah, so he's 56, she's 43. Now, the other thing to know about Dr. Herman is that he is a bit of an eternal bachelor. And he likes the ladies. He has on his arm very often what others will call bimbos. He liked, he basically just was one of those wealthy doctors who kind of went about from girlfriend to girlfriend, and he always had a new girlfriend on his arm. And Jean was not a bimbo. Not a bimbo by any means. She's smart, she's in control of herself, and the reason that I keep reminding us of that is because it's at this party when we meet that Jean is going to go on to a life, a situation where all of that control that she has held for all of her life is going to slip through her fingers because of Dr. Herman. Now, as nice as Dr. Herman was in social circles and at parties, he did also have a reputation for being quite difficult. People would say of him, on the one hand, yes, a very charming man, but also completely unemotional, especially in his relationships. Cold, perhaps, as a person. Not easy. But then, Jean's not easy either. Okay? So you've got two people here who are quite headstrong. Anyway, there is a spark between them, and Herman begins to woo Jean. He starts taking her out, introducing her to his friends, and they're out and about as a couple. I think what's good about them both is that as a couple, they're both very ambitious. You see, Dr. Herman loved the attention and the praise that he gets from his doctor friends. And Jean, well, she eventually wanted to run her own school. So you see, Jean's on this kind of like, she wants to get to a position where she runs her own school, and Dr. Herman wants to keep climbing socially and be the sort of best that he can be. He wants to be the best doctor in all of Scarsdale and in this area. And everyone around them is looking at them going, they are quite a power couple because they've both got the capacity to be those things. You know, they're both headstrong, they're forceful people. So here they are dating away. Jean's two kids, they're living with her, still in Philadelphia, while Herman's in posh Scarsdale, New York. So they have quite a bit of travelling between them to see each other and to keep the relationship going, but they do this to make it work. And then, dun 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 dun, here comes the bride. Dun, 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 dun. Well, almost. Herman proposes after only 3 months of dating Jean. Now this is big for Herman. This is big news. People were like, what? Herman getting married? Never thought we'd ever see the day. He is a ladies' man. This Jean must be something special. So they get engaged. Now, when they're engaged, Jean discovers something. Herman hasn't quite gotten over his bachelor days, and he's still seeing other women. Now Jean discovers this, thinks about it, and decides that she's actually okay with this. She decides that she's going to put up with it. In fact, she writes a letter telling him it's okay that you're still seeing other people, because I know I am the really special one. I think maybe Jean is thinking he just hasn't quite gotten it out of his system yet, and he will in time. Okay, we'll see how that goes as the story progresses. So they're engaged. They start to talk about the wedding. And then one night, out of the blue, Herman turns to Jean and he says, I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I can't marry you. I don't want to be engaged. What? Come on, Herman, man, what are you doing? He just changed his mind. Sorry, we're no longer engaged. So this will be the first time we see Herman really being a bit of a dick and playing with Jean's emotions. So what happens is, distressed by this, Jean goes back to Philadelphia. He stays in Scarsdale. And she puts the engagement ring in the post and sends it back to Herman. When he receives it in the post, he loses his mind. He calls Jean and he's like, why have you given me the engagement ring back? Jean's like, well, you said you didn't want to marry me. Why would I wear it? Herman says, yeah, well, I don't want to marry you now, but that doesn't mean I might never want to marry you. So keep the ring. I want you to keep the ring. And there is a back and a forth that goes on forever. Keep the ring. I don't want the ring. Wear the ring. I'm not wearing the ring. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Back and forth, back and forth. So this goes on for ages. So there's this kind of weird period of time now, right, where they are together, but they're almost not together all at the same time. And I don't really think either Jean or Herman is particularly clear at this point about that. So after a few months of this, I want to marry you, I don't want to marry you conversation, Jean writes a long, long letter in which she apologises for the mess. She apologises to Herman. I mean, I think in lots of ways, writing that letter, I don't know, maybe Jean's thinking he'll come around. He'll come around and decide that he loves me enough and that he wants to marry me, that he'll stop having these relationships with the bimbos. So, for a little period of time, they're maybe not seeing each other as much as they were. But on one of the occasions, when they are seeing each other, Jean mentions to Dr. Herman that she's having trouble sleeping. She can't get to sleep at night, and Dr. Herman says, well, it's okay, I'll give you some pills. It's the 1970s. The pills that we would give for a sleeping disorder now are not necessarily the same as they were then. So the problem is this. He prescribes her the sleeping pills, but she still needs to function throughout the day. So he basically has to give her 2 sets of pills. He has to give her tranquilizers to go to sleep, and then uppers to keep her alert during the day. Speed, basically. So he's giving her amphetamines. So she starts to take these, and this becomes a bit of a routine for Jean. So she takes the tranquilizer to go to bed, and then the next morning she gets up and she has to take the speed, the amphetamine, to get herself going. So they start spending a little bit more time together. They go on lots of trips together. It's something that they would do a lot of. Herman likes to go overseas, and he likes to take Jean with him. Now it's at this point Jean starts wearing the engagement ring. The aforementioned back and forth engagement ring. So to anybody looking at them, right, so they go abroad, I think they go to Jamaica at one point, I can't remember, they go to like 100 places. Anyone looking at them is going to look at her and think, oh, she's engaged to that man. I mean, awkward, because she's not, but she's wearing the ring. The two of them decide that they are in this relationship now. They are. Okay? Whether they're engaged or not engaged, they're just in this relationship. And what's important about this bit is that Jean is now just pretending she doesn't know about all the other women that he's sleeping with. Very weird. Very weird. She's just almost like puts it to a bit of her mind where it's like she's just never going to mention it. Anyway, so as time goes on, Jean is really in the rhythm of these pills now, but she needs more. She needs more to help her sleep, and she needs more to keep her awake during the day. And for about the next 2-3 years, this is how it continues. They're in this relationship, which I think Jean is perhaps more invested in than he's invested in, and Jean is on these various sets of pills. It's around this time Herman gets himself a new secretary, and this new secretary is called Lynn. It's not long before Herman starts dating his new secretary, Lynn. Lynn, I might add, is in her mid-20s. Herman, by this point, is nearly 60. So basically, Herman is seeing the two women at the same time. He's seeing Lynn in her 20s, and he's got Jean. And here's the real kick in the teeth. Both women knew about each other, and Herman made sure they knew about each other. He really wanted them to know because he believed this. He believed that if they both knew about each other, they'd both work harder to be the best girlfriend. They would do their best to almost compete with each other. And he encouraged them to compete. And believe me, they did. Jean and Lynn, they both did everything that Herman wanted to try and be the one for Herman. I mean, it's just stupid. But that's the situation. That's what we have. And the award for Dickhead of the Year goes to Dr. Herman. Now, Jean, she's carrying on her work at the school, but the strain of the relationship with Herman and the pills, it's really taken its toll on her, and she's tired a lot. She's really strung out. To add to the pressure of her strung outness, Jean starts receiving hateful, anonymous phone calls. And in these phone calls, the voices are telling her things like, she's a horrible, ugly, old person. Now, who's making these calls? Well, without any real level of investigation, she just decides it's Herman's other girlfriend, Lynn, and that's it. She decides that Lynn is trying to push her buttons, and that's where these phone calls are coming from. And, do you know, Jean might be right. Maybe that's where the phone calls were coming from, but we don't know. It's never been verified who was making the nasty phone calls to her in the middle of the night, but someone was, and if it was Lynn, then we can't ever prove that it was or it wasn't. So work-wise, Jean finally gets the promotion that she wants. Still tangled up in her non-relationship with Herman, she gets a headmistress position at a really posh boarding school in Cleveland, and this is what she's wanted for so long. So when she starts, she doesn't have the greatest of starts to this job, because Jean's not really respected at this school. You know that old saying about no one will ever really love you until you learn to love yourself, or something like that. Some phrase like that. I think the same thing can be applied here to Jean. No one could really respect Jean because she didn't really respect herself. She was a really changed woman by this point. This had been a good few years with Herman now. You know, we're talking like 8-9 years down the line of this on-off relationship, him with other women. You know, it's been a long time she's been on these pills. And so by the time she gets this job, she's really not the same woman that she was when she met Herman. She's starting to have thoughts about suicide, ending her own life, because she still hasn't found what she's looking for. She just wanted to settle down with Herman and live this happy life in Scarsdale. You know, the life that her friend Marge was, making such a success of. That's what she wanted, but she had been messed around, played, and she's on these pills, and it's just making her shaky. Okay, so 1978, Dr. Herman begins working on something which he will become very well known for. He starts working on the Scarsdale diet. Dr. Herman used to give out a little pamphlet to his patients. Basically, what I described that diet to be in the beginning. So eat well, eat less, and you'll be fine. It was absolutely sensational. It sold millions. Dr. Herman was making TV appearances. He was getting all this press. He was really famous because the Scarsdale diet was such a success. Jean, however, is in the background, furious. Why? Because she claims she wrote most of that book. Jean will say she's the one that created that diet. And yeah, Dr. Herman created the sort of science part of it, but it was her that did the work. Now, was Jean on the TV shows? No. Was Jean making a fortune? No. Was Jean getting awards? No, she was not. So it's really thorny because Jean will say her role in the diet book was huge. He will say, no, it wasn't. She was barely a supporting player. She helped edit a couple of pages here and there, and that was all she did. So it really is, the Scarsdale diet really is the Dr. Herman show. He is estimated to have made almost $2 million from that book and the success of the diet. And to add insult to complete injury, he sends Jean a cheque for $3,000. And that's basically the thanks very much for your help with the book. But he lets her know it's my name on this book, not yours. So take your $3,000 and stop telling people that you had anything to do with the diet, because you didn't. This is so offensive to Jean. She gives the cheque back. Here we go again with these two. It's the ring all over again. Here's the cheque. I don't want the cheque. Take the cheque back. I don't want the cheque. I'm going to put it into your bank account. I'm just going to give you the cash back. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is 10 years they've been together now. And Jean just sees the cheque as a massive slap in the face. I think really what infuriated Jean at this point, and I think we could all understand this, is it was never about the money for Jean. It was about the fact that he was really passionate about this diet. I mean, he genuinely believed people should eat this way if they wanted to live better lives. And Jean says that the work she did on it, which she says was a huge amount, was because she loved him. It wasn't because she thought this was going to be a great money spinner. You know, she thought she was going to be wealthy out of it. She didn't. She did it because she loved him. But now she says it's a success and he's trying to pretend it had nothing to do with it. What this diet debacle brings about is that Herman tries to slowly phase Jean out of his life. You know, he's juggled these women, Lynn and Jean, for a few years now, and he's decided that when push comes to shove, Lynn is the one that he actually wants to be with, and Jean has to go. Now, in her fragile state of mind, this just makes Jean become someone on the edge of life right now. She's not coping well with this. In her work life, Jean becomes the demon headmistress. She's now a complete tyrant. So that lack of respect that she had before, well, she turns that into basically being terrifying. She will be feared. She basically can't control the school. So, the combination of work, pills, and Herman all adds up to Jean just becoming this absolute tyrant who runs the school with, an iron whip. Phasing out of Jean, the sort of getting rid of her from the relationship, it's slow, and it's not a smooth process. There's still nights when she finds herself in Herman's house, in Herman's bed. And what drives it insane is that when she's there, she sees Lynn's belongings there. And for her, this is a nightmare because she's having to share the man that she loves. It's now that Jean puts pen to paper. She writes a letter to Herman, and boy oh boy, it's a zinger of a letter. She wants to tell Herman exactly how she feels, and it's all in the letter. Jean writes, "This letter will ramble, but I had to do something besides shriek with pain. I will be there on the 19th. I'll just tell you, the 19th was a dinner party that Herman was throwing, and he had tried to make sure that Jean wouldn't find out about it, but she did. So she said in the letter, I will be there on the 19th. After 14 years of making love to you, I have earned that right. And I don't care if the slut comes, even if she pops out of a cake naked, frosted with chocolate." Now, she's referring, of course, to Lynn. Although, I can't find any evidence that Lynn liked to jump naked out of cakes, but she might have. Maybe that was Lynn's thing. Maybe, she had, this, that could just be her thing, couldn't it? It's like, do you know Lynn? I don't know Lynn. Who is she? You know Lynn. She's the one that likes to jump naked out of cakes. Who knows? Could be. Jean continues in her letter to talk to Herman about his broken promises. She lists all of the things that Herman has said to her but never delivered on. She lists back to him all of the things that he said to her, including, I want to buy you a whole new wardrobe, darling. I want to get your teeth fixed at my expense, darling. My home is your home, darling. The ring is yours forever, darling. Let me buy you an apartment in New York, darling. She ends, these are broken promises, Herman. She goes on in the letter to continue to call Lynn a slut, a whore. She accuses Lynn of cutting up her belongings and doing all manner of weird things with them. Again, it's never been proven that any of these things were true, that Lynn was doing any of these things. Lynn was too busy probably hiding inside of cakes to cut Jean's clothes up. So she sends the letter, and for days she can't get hold of Herman. She's calling him on the phone, and she can't get an answer. She's visiting the house and he's not in. He's out with Lynn. So after a back and a forth, she finally gets hold of Herman on the phone, and she says, look, I want to come over. And he says, don't. Please don't come over. I'm having a dinner party and I don't want a scene. Lynn is here. You're just going to come here and cause chaos. I don't want you here. Jean ignores the advice and decides she's going to go anyway. And Jean is ready for this visit. How about this, right? For a great visual. A great 1978 visual. Jean gets ready to visit Herman. She puts on her mink coat. She puts a pistol in her pocket. And she takes a bunch of white daisies, gets in into her car and starts to drive. Very cinematic. Now, where did she get this pistol? Well, she'd bought it a few months before for one purpose, and the purpose was to kill herself. Jean Harris had decided she wanted to commit suicide, and she wanted to do it in front of Herman. So she's in the car, she's got the pistol, she's got the daisies, and a thunderstorm begins. I mean, this couldn't be any more cinematic if it tried. For 5 hours, she drives in a thunderstorm to Herman's house. And her intentions are clear. So when she gets to the house, Herman is in bed. She goes up to his bedroom, she knocks the door, he answers it, and he's annoyed to see her. He's like, "It's nearly 1 a.m. Jean, what are you doing here? I told you not to come, you've woken me up." Now, Jean goes into the bedroom. And what she sees is she sees lots of Lynn's belongings lying all over the place. Lynn's underwear is lying around the bedroom, and Jean loses her shit. She starts throwing Lynn's stuff around and she's going bananas. She takes the pistol out of her mink coat and she holds it to her temple. She tells Herman she's had it. This is it. She's going to end her life right now in his bedroom. Herman runs at her to wrestle the gun from her hand, and when he does, a shot is fired. It goes through Herman's hand. So with his hand now shot, he runs to the telephone in his bedroom to call for help. So he's calling down to the housekeeper who's downstairs, and on the phone the housekeeper can hear Herman moaning, and the housekeeper can hear Jean shouting in the background to put the phone down. And then the housekeeper hears 4 gunshots. 4 shots are fired in the room. 4 of them into Herman's body, killing him instantly. Jean, realising he's dead, puts the gun to her own temple and fires, but the gun doesn't have a bullet. It's blank. Jean was absolutely sure that there were more bullets in this gun, so she points at our wardrobe across the room and it goes off. So the gun is working. She puts it to her temple, she tries once more and the gun jams. Now she starts to panic. She won't be able to kill herself with this bloody gun that will not work, so she gives up. She can't get it to work. She has to get out of this house as fast as possible. She runs downstairs, she gets into her car, and she speeds away from the scene. Now, as she's speeding away, she sees a police car speeding towards Herman's house. The housekeeper has already called police and they're on their way. Jean turns the car around and she follows police inside the house up to the bedroom where Herman lies dead. Before police can go through the bedroom door to discover Herman themselves, Jean actually says to police, "The doctor is dead. He's been shot 4 times. It was me that did it." So Jean is arrested that night. She's arrested and she's charged with 1st-degree murder. And it looks like a pretty open and shut case. I mean, Jean bought a gun, she took a gun to his house, and he's dead. Jean maintains it was a suicide gone wrong, and that actually she went there to shoot herself in front of Herman, and it just all got a bit confused. So then we go to the court case. In court, Jean makes the decision that she is going to get up on the stand. This is against her lawyer's advice, but Jean thought this would be the best way to tell her story. She gets up on the stand because she wants to talk about the mental strain that Herman had put her under. Now, with the benefit of hindsight and reflection, years later, people will pore over the Jean Harris murder trial. The whole story will be picked apart, ripped apart, and there is a school of thought which says that if Jean had basically just gotten up on the stand and plain and simple explained the situation as this: I was in love with Herman, he messed me about, he took a much younger lover, he put me on amphetamines, and it ended in him dying, the jury might have been more sympathetic. But unfortunately, that's not how it was played out. Why not? Well, let's look at the 1978-ness of it, and how a lot of cases involving women were reported, and how they were treated by the criminal justice system. There existed a thing called the ladies' defence. By that, I mean that Jean was a lady. My goodness, she was a headmistress, for God's sakes, not a cold-blooded murderer. If she had committed murder, it was simply because a man had pushed her to do it. Fascinating, this ladies' defence. Because, of course, you can see how this looks. And you can see why there is such interest. I mean, the headlines and the films practically write themselves. You have the uptight, well-to-do headmistress who kills the very wealthy doctor who invented the Scarsdale diet. I mean, it's written for people to talk about on a podcast. Of course it is, because it's the perfect crime. But I just think the fascinating bit of it is that in court, so much of the reporting was about what's Jean wearing on this day. Oh, she's got a very expensive outfit on today. She's wearing a very expensive hat. This lady cannot possibly be a killer. This lady's defence. I just think it's so interesting when you sort of look now. I mean, if that headline scrolled across your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter feed today, and it said a headmistress is in court for shooting her wealthy doctor boyfriend to death, you'd go, sure, fine. But it's so interesting that in 1978 it was like, no, surely not. Surely if she did do it, she was driven to it by him. So, in court, how it plays out, it's not quite as cut and dried as Jean going, he was a bastard for years and that's why I snapped. Jean tries to stick to the I went there to kill myself and it just all went wrong. But it doesn't play out too well for her, because there was 4 shots in Herman, and 4 shots doesn't say accident. 4 shots doesn't say there was a wrestle for the gun and you shot him accidentally. It says you meant to kill him, is what it says. The other thing that doesn't help is that letter that we talked about, the one in which she calls Lynn a slut and she is vicious to Herman. Well, it gets read out in court, and a huge problem here is that the defence keep changing their strategy. They keep trying to present Jean in lots of different ways, and for 8 days she's on the stand and her story changes from it was an accident to it was the drugs to I was a good woman ruined by an evil man to I've always had mental health issues, and none of this helps the jury. Eventually they find her guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. The judge who sentenced Jean was lenient because he said this. This is a direct quote, and this is exactly what I'm talking about with this story. The judge sentencing a woman who's just been found guilty of murder says, "I am lenient in my sentencing because I am aware this is a lady I am sending to prison." Interesting. In prison, Jean would go on to look at how females are treated in prison, and don't get me wrong, she did a lot of great work for, young mothers. In particular, she looked at how young mothers are treated within the justice system, and, she raised a lot of money, actually, to help young women in the justice system be treated slightly better. But Jean would only spend 11 years in prison before she was released, and she would go on to appear in TV shows, chat shows. Her books sold millions of copies. She was on all the big chat shows. And I suppose the question that is raised and has to be asked about the Jean Harris story is, would this be the same if she were a man? If it was roles reversed? Or was this celebrity status and the fact that she was able to make so much money a symptom of what female crime looked like in 1978? Jean Harris lived a long life. She died in 2012. And so ends that story. 1978 wasn't it great? Time magazine featured one of its most famous covers. It was a picture of Muhammad Ali, and the headline was, "The greatest is gone." This is because the then undefeated Muhammad Ali was beaten by Leon Spinks, who became the heavyweight champion of the world, but only briefly, because Muhammad Ali would get that title back soon. The Nobel Peace Prize was shared between the presidents of Israel and Egypt for having reached a peace agreement between the two countries. And this one is amazing. In 1978, American women were given the protection of not being fired if they fell pregnant. It had been a battle for years for women to finally get this law passed, and it happened. The law says you wouldn't be sacked on the spot for telling your boss you were pregnant. Great progress. Okay, story 3. Have you ever wondered how it might be possible to escape from prison? I have. Have you ever wondered how it might be possible to do it twice? I certainly know I have thought about this. Often, of an evening, as I've sat painting with my watercolours or at my pottery wheel, I've definitely wondered, how is it possible? Well, we'd only need to ask one man. A Mr. Theodore Bundy. A man who, not once, but twice, escaped prison. Let's look at the first time. It was 1977, and it was a courthouse in Colorado. Now, as is widely known, Ted Bundy was allowed to be his own lawyer in his trial, both his first and his second, and this is his first trial, and that afforded him the luxury of being able to roam freely in and out of the courthouse library, and the guards were around, but they weren't really that present. They would disappear off to smoke cigarettes, and security kind of wasn't that amazing. So, during the days, Ted Bundy would go up to the library, take out books, and do as he pleased. Now, bear in mind, he'd been arrested and charged with kidnap and attempted rape at this point. That's why he's on trial. Not yet for the hideous murders. Those remain unknown. At this stage, he had tried to kidnap Carol Daronche by posing as a police officer, and she was one of the few who managed to get away from him in time. Although he did do his best, he handcuffed her to the steering wheel of his car, and she still managed to escape. Good for her. She ran down the highway and she was picked up by an elderly couple who took her straight to the police. She told them exactly what had happened, and Bundy was arrested. Now, of course, he's denying this, and he's got the audacity to defend himself. What police don't really know at this point, but they're beginning to suspect, is that Bundy had more crimes hidden in his past, and of course, that was true. By 1977, Bundy had killed the following people: Linda Healy, 21, Donna Manson, 19, Susan Rancourt, 18, Roberta Parks, age 20, Brenda Ball, 22, Georgianne Hawkins, 18, Denise Nasland, 18, Janice Ott, 23, Nancy Wilcox, 16, Melissa Smith, 17, Laura Amy, 17, Deborah Kent, 17, Karen Campbell, 23, Julie Cunningham, 26, Denise Oliverson, 24, Melanie Cooley, 18, Lynette Culver, 12, and Susan Curtis, 15. Now, the reason I list those victims is for two reasons. One, to show respect to those victims, because it's always the Ted Bundy show. You do hear their names. I'm lying when I say you don't hear their names, but you don't hear them enough. You hear too much about him, not enough about his victims. But also just, I think it highlights for me at this point, he's actually only been charged with aggravated kidnapping and attempted rape. And there's that wreckage behind him. It's so surreal to me that this is still not known. This absolute cocky bastard, and there is no other way to describe him, this absolute bellend, is walking around that courthouse. No one is any the wiser that he'd raped, murdered, and mutilated the bodies of 18 women at this point. So here's what he says about his first escape. Over the months, I had noticed a number of opportunities to just walk right out. I'd thought a great deal about escape, and I don't know if I had the guts to do it, quite frankly. But on this day, June 7, 1977, this day he decides he's going to. He says the guard went outside for a smoke. The windows are open, and the fresh air is blowing through. The sky is blue, and I said to myself, I'm ready to go. I walked to the window, and I jumped out. Honest to God, I just got tired, sick and tired of being locked up. Did you? Aye, oh, what a shame. Ted Bundy jumped from the second story window of the building, so out of the library, and he landed. The ground below, he broke both ankles in the jump, and he had to hobble for miles to get into the mountains where he hid out. He says, I had no plan. I had no money, nobody helping me. I had nothing. And he'd go without nothing for the next 8 days. Eventually, after 8 days, he is found by police. He's brought back to prison. And then comes escape number 2, and this one is just bonkers. Knowing that he was basically a risk and that he would attempt to run, what they do is they put him into a cell and they add extra bars onto the cell. But that's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough to keep Ted Bundy. What he starts to do is he starts skipping his meals. So he starts to lose weight. he loses a really dramatic amount of weight. He loses 35 pounds in only a couple of weeks. One evening, he cuts a hole in the ceiling of his cell, a tiny hole. He squeezes himself through it, walks around in the ceiling until he gets to the ceiling of the chief jailer's bit of the prison. So the chief jailer lives within the prison. He's got his little apartment, and Ted Bundy is in the roof. Ted Bundy's in the ceiling. The jailer happens to be out for the night, so Ted Bundy walks into his house, takes some clothes out of the chief jailer's wardrobe, and he walks out the front door of the prison. Unbelievable. By the time the guards realise that Ted Bundy is no longer in his cell, it's too late. He had stopped a couple, threatened to kill them if they didn't hand over the car, and now he was on his way. And he was on his way to Florida. So we'll pick up from where we left Ted Bundy in episode 1 at the Shea Omega house. Now remember, Kathy Klein was a survivor, and I told her story. But sadly, on that night that she survived, when he crept into that sorority house, 2 other people weren't so lucky. Margaret Bowman, 21, was asleep in her bed when Bundy beat her to death by smashing a piece of firewood over her head. He then turned to her roommate, Lisa Levy, who he strangled to death. So you remember that I said that night Kathy Klein remembers being taken out of the Shea Omega house with her jaw hanging off, and as she passes a room, she sees that there are police in it. And although she's not told there and then, she knows something terrible has happened, and that the 2 girls inside weren't as lucky as her. Well, that was Margaret and Lisa's room she was passing. You remember that I said Bundy escaped from the Shea Omega house. And so, in 1978, free as a bird, Ted Bundy is roaming around when 12-year-old Kimberly Leach is just having a normal day at school when a man approaches her and he tells her he's received a message from her parents and she needs to go home. And he is there to pick her up. So she goes with him. She leaves the safety of the playground and the school with Ted Bundy. What's so frustrating is that this is witnessed by so many people, and they all assume the same thing. They assume that this is a child just being taken home by a parent. It's when Kimberly doesn't return to class that teachers worry. It's when she doesn't meet her friend after school in the playground that real concern begins. And it's when she doesn't come home that her parents raise the alarm. Days later, her dead body would be found in a park near the school where she had been taken. She had been raped and her throat had been cut open by a large blade. This was Ted Bundy's last victim, and also his youngest. For weeks, he drives around, and eventually police stop him when they see the car with a license plate that they're sure belongs to a stolen vehicle. They realise it's Ted Bundy inside, and he is arrested. By this point, he is number 3 on the American Most Wanted list. And this is when Ted Bundy will go to court one more time. For the last time, and he will attempt to defend himself in 1978, but that's for another time. And so ends the episode. Well, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I am out of here. Thank you for listening. As always, join the Facebook group. Say hello. It's nice to have some new people there. New people to chat to. Say hello to. If you do like the podcast, leave a review. That would be nice. Otherwise, I'll speak to you with the next episode. Okay. Goodbye.
Good evening. Just as the Roman Catholic Church thought it had found a warm and compassionate successor to the late Pope Paul, it now finds it must search anew. For Pope John Paul I is dead, his reign lasting just 33 days, the shortest in more than 3 centuries. Jerry Bowen reports from Vatican City.
The body of Pope John Paul I lay in state today in the Clementine Hall of the Papal Apartments, not far from the bedroom where he died of a heart attack last night.
Well, Terry, I reported over a week ago that Bundy was a suspect in the disco. Now, Florida authorities can continue to concentrate.
Well, my feelings, I'd like to see them, do something to him besides put him in a, institution. I'd like to see him be, killed, if I get my feelings to say.
Prosecutor Robert Egan named Mrs. Wood's son along with all of Gacy's other victims as he opened for the state. Egan described Gacy as rational, premeditated, and evil, who killed his victims like flies when they got in his way. Carefully planned murders that resulted in
compassionate successor to the late Pope Paul. It now finds it must search anew. For Pope John Paul I is dead, his reign lasting just 33 days, the shortest in more than 3 centuries. Jerry Bowen reports from Vatican City.
I'll plead not guilty right now.